Hello, everyone, and welcome to International Conflict Resolution Day, this October 19th, 2023. We still have a lot of people kind of filing in, so we're going to get started very, very shortly, but I want to thank everybody for taking the time out today to be here. It seems especially poignant that today we are going to be doing, celebrating with a training on International Conflict Resolution Day, which we have for many years. Considering the events happening in the world today, for each of us to gain a little bit of insight and adding some skills to our toolkit to be able to manage some difficult discussions that are happening out there is like I said, is just especially important. To all my friends and family in Israel, I just want to say I'm with you. This has been an incredibly difficult last 13 days, and it is such an honor to be able to work with this group and this panel and this committee to be able to kind of refocus on what we can do from so far away. And what we can do is gain some skills and work together to focus on resolving conflicts instead of promoting them. So I do want to start with some introductions. I'll introduce myself. My name is Don Shapira, and I am a mediator. I work at Fresh Start Mediation, and I've been volunteering at the Conflict Resolution Day Committee for a few years. I've had the honor of being a past co-chair of this committee, and have been honored to been doing some of the training and the presentations for the past few years. This year, joining me on this presentation today, we have Chris Menzies. Chris, please introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for taking your time and sharing your time with us this morning. Just to echo what Don was saying, this is really a celebration of a way that we can get together and resolve conflict and work together to and when you resolve conflict, ultimately you bring peace. So we're really excited. We hope you get really good skills out of this that you can use in your personal lives to help improve your relationships with the people that you care about, that you love, your neighbors, and those people in your community. Thank you, Don.
Thank you very much, Chris. We also have our co-chair, Cindy Impala, here with us. Cindy, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Impola, and I work in public education. I am a mediator, and I want to wish you a happy Conflict Resolution Day, because I do believe that everything that is resolvable begins with me, begins with you. So that's where these skills come in. And I have been co-chair this year, taking from the steps of my esteemed co-chair Don. So if ever you're interested in volunteering and spreading the peaceful resolution skills, we will make sure that you know how to at the end of this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. It is also my honor to introduce Paulette DeKelver, and you'll be hearing from her shortly. But Paulette, please introduce yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dawn. And thank you for that beautiful context setting for our gathering here this morning. It's my pleasure to join this group. I'm a new volunteer with Conflict Resolution Day, finding my feet. And honestly, I'm humbled to work alongside all of you with your depth of knowledge and experience. I am trained and licensed as a practicing lawyer and recently turned mediator. And by recent, I mean a couple of years now. After 20 years in litigation, as soon as I started the mediation training, I realized, yeah, there is a lot to be learned, and these skills change the relationships that we have every day. So while I started out thinking this was a great idea professionally, and it turned out to be the case, the bigger impact has been on my personal life and my personal relationships. And I'm just absolutely delighted to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you very much, Paulette. And of course, there's so many other people to thank that aren't here right now that make up this committee, all your volunteer time. We do meet once a month, and we start our next meeting to come up with the training for next year next month. So this is a wonderful opportunity to work together, as Cindy was saying, and so we will be doing a membership drive as this continues. But I also want to thank other organizations. The CR Day Committee, the Conflict Resolution Day Committee, is part of the Dispute Resolution Network by the province of Alberta. And we have so many organizations that support us, including Adria, as you can see, the ADR Institute of Alberta, and so many more. And I do apologize if I'm missing you, but to all the organizations that support us, thank you. I want to welcome you in joining us today to celebrate Conflict Resolution Day and to talk about the topic. It's the apology unraveled. But before we kind of get into it, there are a few housekeeping notes. Please type any questions using the chat feature. There will be, in that chat feature will be monitored. The way I present is I really enjoy being interrupted, especially because sometimes when you're talking about a specific thing, having a question kind of move to the end might take away some of the impact. So that's kind of how we're going to continue with this training. I am actually going to put on the closed captioning. There we go. So now captions are on as well, and we encourage you to engage with us throughout this presentation. This webinar is also being recorded, and it will be posted on the Conflict Resolution Day website, as well as on our YouTube channel. And for those who don't know our website, it is a very inventive conflictresolutionday.ca. So it's very straightforward. Before we begin, it is my honor to introduce Paulette to do our land acknowledgement. Paulette.
Thank you again, Dawn. It is likewise my pleasure and my honor to present a land acknowledgement today. We have participants joining Conflict Resolution Day from many regions across the land that is now referred to as Canada. While I am joining you from land that is now known as Edmonton, my journey has crossed many lands and many territories. I am a descendant of settlers. I'm a student of history, and I'm a mediator and a lawyer. At present, most of my days are spent on land that is part of Treaty 6 territory. Having said that, as a lawyer, I'm licensed to practice in lands now referred to as Alberta and the Northwest Territories. This means that my professional work is done on lands that are part of Treaties 6, Treaty 7, Treaty 8, Treaty 11, as well as parts of Treaty 10 and Treaty 4. Because of this, it's important to me that I try and learn and understand more about the impact of these treaties. My learning at this moment is focused in 3 areas. First, understanding and exploring the privilege that I experience as a settler. Second, to understand and explore the impact of trauma and intergenerational trauma when I engage with Indigenous peoples generally and specifically in legal and conflict matters. And the third area that I'm focusing on right now is to really see and amplify the many successes and achievements of my Indigenous peers and colleagues. My goal with this land acknowledgement is to honor and respect Indigenous communities and to help repair relationship between settlers and Indigenous communities. I am a devotee of nature and love being in nature. By acknowledging the land that we are on, I acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land for generations. And my journey is very much continuing to try to understand my own internal reconciliation process so that when I interact with Indigenous peoples, I am accountable for my own issues and my own feelings so that I can be present and see and hear others in their journeys. Thank you very much for your attention and for sharing this acknowledgement. Don?
Thank you very much, Paulette. And every time I hear your land acknowledgement, it certainly inspires. So thank you very, very much for that. So again, in discussing Conflict Resolution Day, this is an actual annual event. It is done on the third Thursday of October, and it is an international celebration. This information, again, will be presented today, has been prepared by the Alberta Conflict Resolution Day Planning Committee. This committee was actually formed back in 2007 with representatives from various departments of the government of Alberta and local not-for-profit and charitable community organizations. We are pleased to say that this presentation is being offered across Alberta, sometimes through this, which is the presentation that we're doing, but also in local presentations in several communities, not only in this province, but across Canada. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is sort of an introduction to the apology. This is a we're going to be discussing the components of the apology and incorporate conflict resolution skills that have been taught specifically over the last 4 years. If you wish to see some of the previous trainings that all kind of lead up into a story of how to engage in a difficult conversation, how to have kindness in communication, how to monitor your own bias, all of the trainings that we've done over the last 4 years lead up to sort of the last facet of conflict management in a conversation or during a conflict, and that is the apology. They have important purposes in both personal and civic life, and today we will focus our attention more on the personal apologies. So we're going to do a little bit of an initial exercise with you. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide you with 3 sort of examples of an apology, and we're going to put a poll up. And I'll put that poll up fairly shortly before we kind of show the examples. I'll read through all 3 examples. We want your response on all 3 examples. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they decent? Or they're just not quite there? So I'm going to put the poll up. I believe I can. Polls. There we go. Relaunch. Okay. So here are the 3 examples. I had no right to yell at you. You didn't deserve it. I understand if you are upset, and I want you to know that I will work hard to regain your trust and respect. So question 1. Sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
That's example 2, question 2.
Oh, sorry.
No worries, as long as
Did
we're
I go
just
to example 2? Sorry, that's question 2. This is question 1. See, this is what happens when you do it live. I am truly sorry for poking fun at you. Although it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings, I recognize that my words were hurtful. What can I do to make this better? So please, in the poll, answer if you believe this is good, bad, decent, or not quite there. Question or example 2 again. I had no right to yell at you. You didn't deserve it. I understand if you are upset, and I want to know that I will work hard to regain your trust and respect. Do you believe that that was good, bad, decent, or not quite there? Example number 3. I know I shouldn't have done that. I know I probably should have asked you first. I know I can sometimes be a bull in a china shop. All right. We're starting to get some answers kind of come in. I'm going to share them again, but I'm going to start reading from the first one again. Example 1, I'm truly sorry for poking fun at you. Although it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings, I recognize that my words were hurtful. What can I do to make this better? I had no right to yell at you. You didn't deserve it. I understand if you are upset, and I want you to know that I will work hard to regain your trust and respect. And example 3, I know I shouldn't have done that. I know probably should have asked you first. I know I can sometimes be a bull in a china shop. All right. Oh, so now let me end the poll and share the results. So what we see here is that we believe that the first one is good. Mostly 63% of you, or at least a decent starting point. There are some people who feel it's not quite there. We then take a look at number 2, less. Overall, it's either good or decent at around the same rate. And we have around the same rate of people who don't believe it's quite there. A lot of people think the last one is sort of the worst apology of the group. So if you do have comments or anything like that about what you would like to share, or please do so in the chat. And we're going to, am I stopping sharing? There we go. Yeah, there we go. What we're going to do, and we're going to come back to these examples at the end, but we want to go through some of the training right now. And we want to discuss what are the components of an apology. We can actually break this down into parts that are a little bit more achievable. If we don't do the whole apology, but we focus on one aspect, we're already improving. So really focusing it on bite-sized sort of aspects allows us to take a look at it. What does this part contribute to strengthening the relationship? Because at the end, that's the goal. The goal of an apology is to strengthen a relationship. So we're going to first, before we kind of get into the components, I want to show you guys a video. And so I'm going to stop sharing here. And I should just do share screen 2. There we go. And
the nice thing about these apologies is that these are things that you encounter in your daily lives and culture, and some of them hopefully trigger some funny memories for you.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 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 So this video does go on for quite a bit. The funny thing is, with all of these apologies, the funny thing is that there's the same 2 words, but in so many of those clips, they mean entirely different things. Some of those apologies are, I'm sorry for how my actions may have hurt you, or I'm sorry, I'm about to kill you, or I'm sorry, it's completely different ends of the spectrum. And the point that we're trying to make by showing this video is that the words I'm sorry rarely, or if ever, are enough. Rarely, or if ever, are they enough. So what are the components, the actual components of an apology? Well, what we need to do is we need to take a look at it in 4 steps: identify, empathize, analyze, and plan. So the first step in apologizing is you have to own your own part in the situation. Now, this doesn't mean that you agree, right? We're not talking about there being only one truth. We're looking at a sort of empathy where we talk about somebody else's truth being their reality. So you don't have to agree, but you are validating that your actions or non-actions had an impact on the other. This conveys that you understand how your behavior, or lack thereof, was perceived and how you influenced the situation. As in every relationship, it always takes 2 to create the experience. So it is crucial we are able to understand and own our part, even when our intention was not to harm. And that's a really important part. There's that saying, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. Just because your intention for something was good doesn't mean it was the outcome. And sometimes it's just the outcome that we need to focus on. So the second step that we want you to focus on is to empathize. It's to verbally express empathy. The importance of this lies in the fact that you're willing to repair and move forward in a way that feels good or perhaps healthy to the other person. When repair is missing, the other person may not feel the relationship is valued or that it's not worth repairing for you. So taking that steps and think, and here's how I think my behavior made you feel. And then we can get into a dialogue about these things. And then we can start analyzing in steps 3 and 4. The next steps is to vow to do better. Here's why I did what I did. And here's the plan that we're going to put together to make sure it doesn't happen again, because my intent isn't to hurt. You're communicating that you would like to improve. You're now able to do this following the first 2 steps, because you have to own your part before you can get there. And then you made an attempt to repair. Now you're ready to learn how to work together to ensure this doesn't happen. Now, a lot of people think about Canadians around the world, and there's that trope that we apologize, that Canadians always apologize. But there's some interesting studies, and we do have the resources available. There is a difference between the way Canadians apologize and actually being apologetic. There's a study that shows in Canada, we use in our idiosyncratic language the words "I'm sorry" instead of things like "excuse me." We're not actually apologizing. When we're in a store and somebody stands in our way, we want to grab that can of soup. Instead of saying "excuse me," we typically say "I'm sorry," right? It's part of idiosyncratic language. We do not apologize more than most other people. And it goes so far as to say the Apology Act of Canada had to be altered in order to incorporate this part of idiosyncratic language. Now, in the legal world, I am not a lawyer, and there are lawyers out there that are going to be pulling their hair out after I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm sorry. But the idea is that when you say in certain legal terms or in certain legal circles, the words "I'm sorry" is that you are accepting blame. And the way we use "I'm sorry" here in Canada, we're not actually accepting blame. We just do it to be nice. And so that's something to look at and something to consider. Oh my God, there we go. We actually have a little bit of a video for this to show how an "I'm sorry" can be very, very bad.
I'm so sorry. Boys, it's been a terrible mistake. Howie is going to say something to you, aren't you, Howie? I'm going to get you out of this as quickly as possible. Howie, now say, come on now, say your little
I'm
piece.
sorry I took the money.
That's it.
I'm sorry I took the money. I'm sorry. I'm
Now,
sorry.
that's it.
I'm awfully sorry.
That's fine. Now, boys, all the money is here. Come on, Howie.
Sorry.
I just want to apologize to you again and tell you how I'm sorry I am about the mistake. And if there's anything at all I can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. Come along, Howie.
Sorry.
Time to bother me.
I just want to note 2 things. First of all, thank you to the late great Paul Rubens for giving us something to always smile and laugh at. And I think this is the first time in our history that we have used a Cheech and Chong movie for one of our examples. So it's a great day for most people here. What I want to do now is I want to reflect on the following statements. And I want there to be a little bit of a discussion around this. Please put in the chat or in the Q&A. I want you to reflect on the following statements. What does it mean to own your part in a situation? Where are there examples in your life where it was difficult to own your part in a situation? Why do you think it was difficult? How was the situation resolved? What was it? where are the examples in your life where you were able to own your part easily, and did that make a difference in the apology? And I guess throughout this, kind of think of that statement, that throwing stones in glass houses sort of thing. So before we kind of get I've asked you guys to reflect, and we're going to take the time here a little bit. But Chris, do you have any sort of examples in your time where it was difficult to own your part in a situation, or where you did it and it made a difference?
It was funny, Don, as you were sharing, prompting and prompting our wonderful participants to consider their own histories, that you really reminded me of my previous world life, working in industry. I would have to do safety reports on occasion. If I had done something, maybe I forgot to put on my signal, or I got a parking ticket, or some inadvertent situation that required a safety report. I remember the process is that you have to go through a self-reflection to find out what was the root cause of the safety infraction. And I just remember how uncomfortable that whole event was. I'm not gonna lie, it was tough to do. So that's something that reminded me of, that was a personal experience. How about yourself, Don?
Oh, I think that there are just way too many times that I've had to own my part in a situation. If I begin listing them now, we won't be able to complete this training. But Cindy, is there any interesting
Yes.
comments coming in the chat?
Yeah, we have a comment. The first comment we've got of owning it is admitting fault as being vulnerable. Pretty powerful there. And thank you for offering that comment. There's more messages coming in. I think it's difficult to own your part when you think you're right. So that position, right, versus that interest-based piece. I think it's sometimes easy to justify your behavior if you think the other person is behaving badly. Very, very well understood, where it can be difficult to own your piece when you're stuck in the position, right? We've got some good stuff to offer that. IL offers, I think owning your part is difficult when you don't know how you would do things differently.
Right. Wow, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great
And yeah, and I hope I haven't missed anybody, but I think we had a question. One is owning your part, recognizing where you could have done things differently. It's posed as a question, so I'm not cleared on if that.
Well, I mean, if it is a question, I think that's part of owning your part. I think that owning your part, and I love that first comment, was about the vulnerability aspect of it. It's being able, and then it kind of flows through the rest of the comments, right? It's difficult when you feel you're right. And this isn't about right and wrong. It is about being able to look at something, instead of having the problem be between us, it's being able to put it over here, and then we work as a team to do it. And it's that perspective shift that needs to happen. And when you own your part, it means that there is an action that I did, whether I had the intent or not to do it, that caused an effect that wasn't desirable. That's it. There's a way of when you own your part, this isn't about being right or wrong. It's about strengthening the relationship.
Right.
And sometimes that's tougher to do, and sometimes that is easier to do. But thank you very much
Yeah, I have a couple more comments just to honor them. Difficult to separate, to apologize when the other party doesn't acknowledge their contribution to it, or owning your part when there is a lack or poor communication with the parties involved. And lastly, sorry, the other person doesn't acknowledge their piece. Oh, thank you, Christine. You're just clarifying what you said. Okay, so it really comes down to those communication skills, Don.
And I really love that one point. I think that's a point worth actually taking a moment to pause and discussing, where it's really difficult for me to own my part when they're not going to own their part. The point of this training is that, is it ideal if both sides of a conflict was to understand, or were to understand these concepts? Absolutely. But it's not required. If what we do is we mirror each other, if I show you consistent empathy over a long period of time, not just in a moment, it actually changes the nature of the relationship, and I get that empathy in return. And we're actually going to be talking about how, especially in that comment later on, when we start talking about the I statement, how we can show empathy because we have the training, but how we can induce empathy as well in the other person. So these are some tools that we're going to be adding to your toolkit. Great comments. Because one thing we can't do is we can't jump to conclusions. And I think that this is where, you know, when we start talking about an apology, about why it's important, jumping to conclusions aspect. And I think, Chris, you have a great story about jumping to conclusions, and we're going to talk about that and how it can affect or disaffect a relationship. So I'm going to let you kind of take this one over.
So for jumping to conclusions, maybe this sounds familiar to folks in the audience. When I was in university, you might be thinking about your time in church or in your places that you frequent at, different types of meeting spaces. I would always sit in the exact same chair every lecture. And at some point during the semester, somebody else sat in my chair. And I was offended by that. I was like, hey, don't they know that that's where I sit every day? But the funny thing is that it's not really my chair. So like, am I actually jumping to a conclusion that them sitting in that chair, they're actually inadvertently done something, or maybe they're just being innocent and, you know, that's where they wanted to sit that day. So that's how I like to think about jumping to conclusions. Or is somebody doing something out of malice, or are they just, maybe it's something that they're doing innocently and I just need to take a step back and reevaluate.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I think that there's a wonderful video that we found here that we're going to take a look at. But I think that the one thing that's really important here is nothing in our life ever works out as good or as bad as we imagine it will be. Because I remember as a child thinking to myself, you know, when I got in trouble and my mom would say to me, wait till your dad gets home. That 2-hour period between when I was in my room and when my dad got home was the scariest 2 hours ever. I'm like, I'm going to be in so much trouble. Like, and all these scenarios are running through my head. And then my dad would invariably come home every time and be like, hey, think about what you did. You're grounded for the weekend. You can't go out. Right. And then that grounding after like 2 days was just like, oh, heck yeah, let's go and have fun. Right. So it was just never as bad as I thought it to be. But this video, I think, is does a really good job in kind of exploring that in more detail.
John, you have a comment from a participant that said those 2 actual hours were the real punishment.
Right. Yeah, they totally were. Maybe my parents are smarter than I think they are.
It's a warm and pleasant Saturday in Denver, Colorado. Spring is springing. Folks are brunching. Dogs' tails are wagging. Babies are napping. Let's for a moment focus in on one special Coloradan, Gail.
Hey, I need to talk to you about something, and a meeting will be done in 30 minutes. Oh, crap. What is it? Hey, is it? Did I forget to pay rent? No, I totally paid rent. We're getting evicted. We're totally getting evicted. I've never been evicted before. There's not enough time for me to find somewhere else to live. I'm gonna have to go back to Texas with my mom. I can't go back to Texas. She's never gonna let me forget this.
Now let's pause for a moment here to give you, audience, a little background. Gail has lived in this rented house with the same roommate for over a year. She has never been late on rent. She keeps a tidy home. And the few times she has needed to contact her landlord, their interactions have been mutually satisfying.
I did scratch the floor a little bit before putting the scratch pads on my new chair. He's been pretty clear.
You see,
I'd like to keep the
what
floors
Gail is
unscratched.
doing here is falling into a trap many of us fall into. A thinking trap.
He took the furnace and he saw the scratches.
Of all the different
And now he
thinking
knows that
traps,
I can't keep it
Gail
on
is
the
exhibiting
responsibility.
jumping to
Not deserved to
conclusions.
Oh, if that was
She is
me,
making
there's
assumptions
one.
without seeking more information.
That's how you do it.
On top of that, she's blaming herself
And then,
for the assumed
of
eviction.
course, you'll get scratches. I'm freaking out.
Now, let's just pause here. What could Gail do to avoid freaking out? She could stop. Well, she's already stopped, but you get the point. Ask,
Why would my landlord evict me? What backs that up?
think,
What are other reasons my roommate might need to talk to me? Something on the brighter side, maybe?
realize.
Oh, shoot. Our thoughts are powerful, and I can be in charge of choosing the healthy ones.
Ah, exactly.
Oh, hey, what did you want to talk to me about? You got tickets to the show. Isn't it sold out? That's amazing. I thought you were going to tell me we were getting evicted.
You see, all is okay in Yale's world. Thinking traps can wreak havoc in a life. They're dangerous. With the proper tools and taking a moment to stop, ask, think, and realize, you can keep a clear head to handle whatever your roommate actually wanted to talk to you about.
The truth is in the absence of information, we typically jump to the worst conclusions. If we try and avoid assuming that someone acted out of an intentional desire to cause harm, maybe there's a different, more plausible explanation for their actions. Maybe that student, by the way, Chris, just didn't know it belonged to and just sat there. But maybe that time we got a cut off, it wasn't because we did something wrong. Somebody's just in a hurry. So why is it easy to jump to conclusions? Well, it's easy because we fail to recognize that there are sometimes missing relevant facts, or we have an overconfidence in our perspective on a situation. So that could be because of preconceived notions. It could be because of our prejudices or unconscious bias, which, by the way, is the topic. And like, this is all a form of cognitive bias. Now, the bias aspect, that was actually our training last year. So to really start delving into what those mean and how we can combat those, please go back and watch our 2022 training. So there's three types of jumping to conclusions. There's fortune telling. We believe we know how a situation will resolve, even though we don't have enough information, right? We can use number two, which is labeling. We use preconceptions or fallacies or even overgeneralizations to make assumptions about a person or a situation rather than relying on the existing evidence. Or mind reading, which we all believe we're very, very good at, but we're all very, very bad at. We believe that we understand how someone is just going to, what they're thinking without any supporting evidence. I know what you're going to say. The reason we do it is because we rely on mental shortcuts or the heuristics. Again, we talked about that last year. This increases our speed of our judgment and decision making. It saves energy, but the cost of this, what you save, is accuracy and optimality. So this can cause stress, anxiety, and it can actually breach trust in a relationship. These things can lead to conflict. So one aspect of the apology is learning how to avoid the situation that would require an apology. And that's where jumping to conclusions really, really ties in. So how do we avoid these things? Well, let's explore some strategies to avoid it. Okay. So how can we avoid this? Slow down. You got to think through a given situation. Ask what information could help you reach a defensible conclusion. And sometimes even when we're amped up, the ability to just walk away and think, right? Then you can start thinking, well, what other competing hypothesis do I have? Am I favoring one hypothesis way too early on? When you have the ability to poke holes in your own conclusions, then you know you're taking the right step. We have a pretty high opinion of ourselves, especially when we're in a conflict or in an argument. When you can start poking holes in your own story, you know you've really taken some massive steps forward. And then you can start taking a look. Well, was there a similar situation that occurred in my past that I can learn from or can rely on? And now you can start, getting some more information. You've become more informed. Okay. Now you can start taking a look at, well, maybe the way I jump to conclusions or maybe the situation requires an apology. You have to take yourself away from this elevated emotional environment to sometimes be able to take a step back and really consider your options. So let's talk about it. Can you think of an example? Again, I look forward to seeing these in the chat. Can you think of an example when you or someone you were in a conflict with jumped to conclusions based on a statement or a comment that was made? Right. So, Chris, we have the stealing of the chair, the absolute theft of your property in that moment. What about you, Cindy, Paulette? Do you guys have any examples there?
These can be examples, just whatever you expect in your daily lives, from waiting in lines. Some people like to cut ahead of the line. Some people line up at the back, or even when you're driving. There's lots of examples when you're driving. Some people, when they merge into a new lane, they like to do the zipper. Other people just race to the front. Like, what kind of examples can we see in the chat? I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say as well, Cindy.
Nothing in the chat yet, but I think of doors, going to a mall, opening the doors, or holding the door when you see a person approaching, right? Again, that'll kind of lead into managing expectations, but I form a certain expectation that we're going to open doors for each other, period. It's kind of close-minded on that, I guess. But when it doesn't happen, like the zipper, Chris, there's thoughts going through your mind.
No, that's fair, because like, how long do you hold the door open for? If they're way back there, do you stand there and hold the door for a while, or what's the cutoff?
Yes, totally. Good example.
Right. And there's a lot that happens in these social interactions, right? And there is something about this, about expectations. And I'm glad you brought that up, Cindy, because we're going to be discussing that later on as well, where expectations are sometimes great and many times really bad for a relationship. And we'll discuss that a little bit later on. So we got to set the stage. So now we work from a place that there has been some conflict and an apology is warranted. Okay. Now we can start taking a look how we can communicate that to our other party. Remember when I mentioned before about empathy? Now it's a way of inducing empathy. That's kind of the next step that we're going to be talking about. So what we're talking about is the I statement. Now, we discussed in detail the I statement back in 2018 during our confidence in communication presentation. And I look forward, again, go to conflictresolutionday.ca, be able to see the 2018. But this is the basic sort of structure of an I statement. Okay. I feel, so when something happens, when blank, I feel this way because of how it impacted me. So what I need is this. What you're doing is, you're using non-judgmental language. You're talking about yourself. You are not using the word you, which is very judgmental. But what it also allows us to do is we use the word you so often that knowing that we're not allowed to use it slows down our thought process. We become focused on how to talk. And so it really slows down so that you don't have a lot of those emotional reactions. Instead, you have thoughtful responses. So it slows everything down, makes you focus. And what that person hears is an understanding into how you're feeling and why, and that it's not their fault. So, for example, when I'm being yelled at or when I'm being called names, right, I feel frustrated or devalued and I get defensive.
These are really tough, especially in our personal relationships. It's very easy to default to the you when it's much more constructive to leverage what Dawn is mentioning and really think about how you can use the I statements to convey your feelings to people you're in conflict with.
Right. Right. And then you continue it with this, this achievable outcome. So in the future, I wish we, not you and I, like we as a team could take steps like counting to 10 or ensuring that we use respectful language towards each other, because my goal is to strengthen our relationship. Now, we can see what happens when we use the wrong statement. So this is where we want your input here. How could we better say using an I statement? Again, when this happens, I feel this way, so this is what I need. How can we change these statements? And I'd love to be able to see in the chat your replies. You're wrong, you need to listen to me. How can we change that into an I statement? You're always late. I'm not covering for you for your irresponsibility anymore. How can we change that into an I statement? Why would I help you finish that project? It's not my fault you're behind. How can we change those into productive I statements?
Maybe what I could do is,
I want to give you guys a minute to be able to do that on your own. But Chris, yeah, go ahead.
I was just to back up what you're saying, Don, maybe I'll post one in the chat and then let folks think about it, because it's tough to do, right? Like, it's, where do you even begin? Could you help us with an example, Don?
Certainly. So number one, restated, right? You're wrong, you need to listen to me. I'm trying to discuss what is occurring and would like the opportunity for us to both feel heard. When I was interrupted, I was frustrated and not able to clarify what I was explaining.
So at that point, you're identifying the listening piece, the need.
Right.
You're not you're not using you really strong.
Yeah, because what happens if I was to say you're wrong, we automatically become defensive. This is about changing the appearance of conflict and avoiding it altogether, because conflict means me versus you. And again, when we want to strengthen a personal relationship, it's not about me versus you. It's about both of us, two smart people working together, putting our heads together to battle that. And that thing, this nebulous conflict, or this nebulous opportunity to strengthen our bond together.
We've got from Jenny, I think we can start all with, I would appreciate if, number one, we can listen to each other more. I would appreciate if you would come early so that we can get more done as a team. So there you go. Thank you, Jenny.
Right. I would appreciate is a great one, right? Because it shows what you need. The reason you really want to put that feeling word in there, like when this happens, I feel devalued, or I get frustrated, or I feel, it's because that's the empathy inducing piece. I'm letting you know I'm sharing my vulnerability with you. And we as human beings, even in relationships, even in tough spots, when we hear of somebody's vulnerability, we have that mama bear or papa bear sort of, I want to protect you. And so that's where an I statement becomes very, very effective. And the goal here is to diffuse conflict.
Before you head on, Lenny has offered an example. I feel frustrated because we are not listening to each other. I need us to have better communications when we work together to better our work.
Right. So it's important in this to be able to structure it, and that is great. And as we keep going, we get better. But the reason we want to say the situation first is because when this happens, I feel frustrated, instead of I feel frustrated, because now you're putting a post of your frustration towards somebody. So we want to be sure that we talk about the issue first, this nebulous issue. This nebulous issue can cause frustration within me. And I don't want that, because this relationship is really important. So let's focus on not doing that, because when you're planting the post of the situation, that can be solved. When you plant the post of your frustration, the sometimes defensive knee-jerk reaction would be, well, I feel frustrated too. right? So we need to talk. The structure is just as important as anything else. When this happens, I feel this way because of that. So this is what I need to happen. Okay. So
wonder-
really good attempts. Sorry, Paulette.
No, I just as you're sharing these examples, what's coming up for me is remembering about my kids. And so the thing about when you start learning this stuff and modeling it is the kids are smart and that's when they start to pick it up. And so I've heard from my son when I'm interrupted, because he's heard me, use that descriptor, I feel invisible, Mom. Oh, like what valuable information in that. So we're still working on that third piece about the planning, but he's starting to be able to nail how those feelings land for him. Hugely powerful information for me to receive as a parent and in building what I want going forward. So that's just the point you were just making about that feeling piece being really, really powerful.
Right. Because, and again, like if you're doing this for the first time, and again, this is why modeling behavior is really important, because if you're doing this the first time, it's going to feel pretty robotic. You're going to feel awkward. Right. It's like doing anything. The first time you threw a football, it was a bad throw. The first time you swung at a baseball, it was a bad swing. But the better you get, or the more you practice, the better you get. Just like anything else, what we're teaching you here are sort of mental workouts. So it is the practice. So how do we diffuse conflict? We start talking about, again, we talked about this topic in depth back in 2019, diffusing conflict at work and at home for that presentation. But the focus here is we want to take a look at what are our emotional reactions of conflict, right? Our positions versus our interests, and what we need to consider when involved in a conflict. So our emotional reactions are typically based off of triggers. A trigger is an emotional reaction to an event. This occurs when our needs are simply not being met, or our needs are being challenged. Somebody's standing in our way from achieving them. It is important to be aware of your reactions in that sense. So how do we got to focus on diffusing our triggers and reactions, or at least understanding them. So now we want to take a look again, as we mentioned, the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is typically quick, without much thought. It's tense and typically aggressive. A response is thought out. It's calm. It's non-threatening. Okay. So that's point number one. Point number two, when we start talking about the difference between positions and interests. Positions are claims we make about an issue that have been validated through our experiences, and we hold like as our judgment on the matter. Okay. An interest are the why we want what we want. What is the underlying reason, value, or motivation? So whenever you're in a conflict, it's really important to consider what could the other person's position be? What could their interests be? What feelings are they experiencing? And what are their concerns, hopes, and fears? So we typically don't have tests on this, but today we have a little bit of a test in the form of a crossword puzzle. Okay, so one down, what is, and I want you guys to kind of guess as you're in the chat, if you know which one it is or which word would fit where, just go one, this is the answer, two, this is the answer, things like that. So what is the want? Two, what is it to cause a negative reaction in somebody?
Jenny's got number one, has the position.
Correct. Snap. All right. Two, to cause a negative. So this is two down. This is 7 letters. To cause a negative reaction in someone.
Trigger.
Nice. So far, we're
Two answers came in at both the exact same time, too. So.
nice. All right. 3 is that's an 8-letter word. A sharing statement telling somebody how you feel. We kind of messed this one up, I think, a little bit. but I'll take it. I think this is my fault. Instead of an I statement, it's an I message we wrote for that one because we're trying to get it to fit. So blame me for that one. All right, 4 across, the why. If number 1 is the want, what is number 4? The why. Why do we want that? What is another word for that?
Interest.
Interest. Very good.
Thank you, Jenny.
Number 5, to make something less tense.
Diffuse.
Diffuse. There we go. And last one, express regret for something said or done. Is to
The session is about. Yes. Apologize.
yes, apologize. Now, for those that found this difficult, I found it incredibly easy because I had the answers right there. So, and then my note here is, this is the crossword answer key. Please be sure to have this slide be hidden. That was my note.
It won't be hidden online.
We're sorry.
That's right. So now we kind of shared, what how the action made us feel, and we understand emotional reactions, positions, interests. Now we have to listen to the other party's response. We've learned how to communicate ours. But now we need to take a look at how we can listen to someone. And listening it's a skill. Just like any other skill in communication, right? We take courses on negotiation mastery and conflict resolution and mediation, but we never really focus on just the listening. So why is it important that we have good habits for active listening? Now we start talking about, there's like 5 different levels of listening. And the first one, being like ignoring, right? So that's the worst level. And then we go down to like pretend listening. That's typically what I do in a training like this. And then we go all the way down to active listening. Excuse me, I just have a frog in my throat. So listening is a great tool to use to learn more about the world around you, right? Being silent makes you listen a lot more. We sometimes take listening for granted. Silent helps you hear things you wouldn't normally hear. If you are actively listening to somebody, where you're looking at them, you're making eye contact, your body language is showing that you're interested, what happens is people typically open up more. And the more that you allow that environment of, I'm interested in what you have to say, it's important to me what you're saying, the more people typically open up. This killed me. I hope that's a little better. There we go. Listening is respectful, and you know what? It is deserved. In a relationship, people feel like they deserve to feel heard or listened to. And the truth is, is that one hidden? There we go. People start to heal the moment they feel heard. The moment somebody feels heard, feeling heard means feeling understood. You don't have to accept that this is my reality. I just need you to accept that you understand and agree that it is my reality. That's how I feel heard. So we have to understand what the other person is conveying, and then we validate it. I hear you. I see you. I know what you mean now. Those are such powerful words, and they really strengthen relationships. So we're going to choose like there's a lot of exercise that we could do, and we talk about paraphrasing, we talk about a bunch of different things. So in this exercise, and this one's a lot of fun, I'm going to say 7 words, and in the chat I want you to paraphrase what I just said. Okay? You cannot use the same words that I'm using. You have to use your own words. And I need you to tell me what I meant and what I said. Okay? In the chat. Here are the 7 words. I never said he stole my money. What did I just say? So I'm going to give you guys a moment to paraphrase that and to discuss the real importance of why paraphrasing is really, really important. Again, the 7 words are, and just if you could put it in chat too, Cindy, I never said he stole my money. And I'm going to give you guys a minute on this, and we'll see what we can do here. Well, I mean, Chris, you didn't have to yell it in chat. That's
A good paraphrase.
that's right.
You misunderstood me. And Pamela says, so what I'm hearing, there's a misunderstanding about what you said. Terry Ann offers, you do not agree with what was said before. Confirming, these are coming in faster than I'm reading it. Confirming you never said what was said before. Christine says, so what you were saying is you never stole your money.
We can
You don't-
start seeing that the examples as they're coming in
Oh my gosh, yeah.
are pointing to different aspects of this. Because the truth is, and I'm going to kind of let you guys off the hook, as I'm going through this, these 7 words, it's a really unique sentence in the English language, because depending on which word I emphasize, it could mean something entirely different. I'll show you. I never said he stole my money, right? It wasn't me who said it, right? I never said he stole my money. It was just something that was never said. It's a lie. I never said he stole my money. I implied it. I never said he stole my money. It was her. I never said he stole my money. I gave it to him. I never said he stole my money. It was Chris's. And I never said he stole my money. It was my wallet. The point of that exercise is to show how we can sometimes even jump to conclusions about what we think somebody said. This is the importance of communication. When we communicate properly using paraphrasing language, we can help. Because if my friend texted me and said, I never said he stole my money, and I reply with, well, I'm going to find who did, because I believe he said, I never said he stole my money, I'm actually not being a good friend, even though that's my intent. If I was to reply instead with, what I'm hearing you say is that it wasn't him who stole your money, and then asking, is that correct? I now have a chance of full understanding, where they could reply with, no, it was him, but it wasn't my money that was stolen. It was my wallet. Right?
Yeah.
Now I get clarification because I've listened and I've asked questions.
Don, Janine offers a question of curious about your body language during your response when you were going through the different 7 sentences.
Right. And that's the beauty of active listening. Because active listening, you don't only use your ears, you also use your eyes, your understanding of body language. It becomes what somebody's trying to express becomes, excuse me. I don't know what's going on with me today. But when we start looking and really actively listening, we can also get the message just from body language, right? I never said he stole my money. I never said, right? Like all these different cues help us in understanding what somebody is. So especially if you get a text message on something like this, you have now lost like 75% of how we communicate, because most of what we actually try to relay comes through body language, not the actual words we use, which is again doubles down on why it's so important to paraphrase and be able to ask questions.
Don,
So
Terry
something-
offers, sorry, Chris, Terry Ann offers tone is huge too. Hence texts are always hard to interpret, just as you said. I just want to put a shout out. The exercise within our materials on our website come from the Learning Seed, The Art of Listening. This was one of the sessions we hosted in previous years, but there's an exercise in there and it's a worksheet. So this is something you can do at home, at work, whatever, that really, essentially the exercise is spending 2 minutes talking to each other. Pick one question, your favorite author, or tell me your story, whatever it is. And then the other party takes a few minutes after to reiterate what they think they've heard. And then it's really a feedback situation. Did I miss something? Well, or they understood it differently. It's really another great exercise that the Learning Seed has offered us.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And again, we start seeing the importance of all these things, and all it comes down to paraphrasing, just like the I statement, you get better with practice. It becomes easier. A lot of times I get this question of, well, paraphrasing, it seems like it increases the amount of time, like it's not very efficient in communication. And I say it's the exact opposite. Think of all the time that you would actually save and with conflict through misunderstandings if we consistently and constantly paraphrase, right? So now we're going to start talking about empathy. Okay, now we've talked about empathy before. It was one of the main themes in our 2021 training, kindness and communication presentation. Now, empathy is kind of defined as the action of understanding, being aware of or being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another through of either a past or present, without having the feelings, thoughts, and experience fully communicated in an objectively explicit manner. Okay. Empathic statements are made with the intention of conveying understanding, non-judgment, and as Brene Brown says, especially when it comes to judgment, which is really hard for most of us, right? And acceptance for someone's feelings and the situation. Empathy is sometimes mistaken for sympathy, and they are two very different things. Sympathy, and I love how Brene Brown says this, empathy provides connection, and sympathy provides disconnection. So let's start talking about some examples of empathy here. I'm going to actually play one of the videos, but I recommended this. All three will be in our resources. The first one, the cartoon with the bear, that is the Brene Brown lesson on empathy. We've played it before. I highly recommend it. When It's Not About the Nail is a great one. When we start talking about seeing empathy live and in person. But the one that I enjoy the most, and we haven't used before, is the movie Inside Out, which, if you want to just save a whole lot of time in watching 4 or 5 years of training, just watch that movie. It's perfect in explaining how, how our emotions sometimes dictate our actions and how important they all are. But I'm going to be playing that video right now.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I've had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry. It's all I had left of Riley. I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends. I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
That was loud. Sorry about that. I really love that video because it really explores how the difference between empathy and sympathy. Yeah, I recognize you're sad, but you know, blah blah blah, blah. Like laugh. Let's do so. Let's be active. The intent was for somebody to feel better, and I agree to that. But when you actually take the time to empathize with somebody at a certain point, man, does it ever create connections, and it's a wonderful thing. So let's consider empathy a little bit more completely and deeply. And the first aspect of this is that empathy, it suggests the notion of projection. You have empathy for a person when you can imagine how they might feel based on what you know about the person, even though you may not those feelings have been expressly or explicitly communicated. It requires experiencing someone's concern, listening to them, validating them, and that makes it tough. When we use sympathy, we often respond with but or with at least. So what we need to do is we need to learn how to create empathic statements. Okay, we often create empathic statements naturally with our loved ones without putting much thought into it, right? We've grown together, we learn, how to communicate with each other, and we understand sort of what works and what doesn't through trial and error, right? But if you think about times you're interested in someone's story and you gave them encouragement or support, maybe you even acknowledged the pain or paraphrase their concerns out loud. In certain ways, we've learned naturally how to do these skills with really important people in our lives. Now, we carry all those lessons into our next relationships. So we sometimes have the expectation that the way that we deal with empathic statements and the way that we deal with conflict in our own family, everybody out there in the world deals with it in the exact same way. And if they don't deal with it in the way that I need to hear it, that means they don't like me. And that's a difficult position to be in. So now, if we just kind of do a quick review, at this stage, we've let the other person know how we feel through an I statement. We've listened to their response actively and empathetically. But we also need to be practical and realistic about what we can expect from the other party. And that really kind of goes back to that one question we had near the beginning, was about that expectations. So I'm going to say this. I work as a divorce mediator. And I will say, people talk about the number one reason for divorce. People will say the number one reason for divorce is finances, or people will say the number one reason for divorce is infidelity, or whatever it may be. And I say it's none of those things. I say the number one reason for divorce is uncommunicated expectations. It is the number one killer in all relationships. If we can communicate openly and with vulnerability and with empathy what our expectation is, our relationships, all our fundamental relationships, whether they are personal, whether they are at work, they will be better, they will be stronger, and they will be healthier. That's where I don't need the other person to know what I know. If I communicate my expectations and I create the environment that allows them to create announce their expectations, we have a healthier relationship. If we could,
Dawn.
Yeah.
We've got a comment that is just beautiful, and it says, unspoken expectations lead to future disappointment.
wow.
Yeah.
Right. And where do we turn that disappointment? Towards them, towards the other party. That was very, very profound. Thank you. That's a great comment. But if we could sum up all the causes of hurt, pain, and hatred in one word, it really would be expectations. We have relationships that can meet a lot of our standards and still fall short of meeting our expectations. I have relationships with people. My wife is like, I love her to death, but there are certain things that I don't talk to her about. Well, we communicate very, very well, but I don't talk to her about my love of rugby. She doesn't like it. Right? I have a good friend that I talk to about that. I have friends. It's just think about a board, any board. People come in with different skill sets. And in our lives, people can fill those different holes that we might have. You should never look at one person to be everything for you. Everybody brings something to the table. Just as much I have strengths, I also have weaknesses. So I can communicate what I can deliver. You can communicate your expectations, and I can say, these three will be easy, but this fourth one, that's going to be tough. How can we come up with a plan together for me to do that? Because that's not something that's not a strength of mine. Right? And we can come up with a plan together. Oh, sorry. So I want to show you guys this video right here. This is a Tony Robbins video, and it's quite fantastic. That really kind of explores what we're talking about right now.
I spent 15 years of my career trying to.
The point that I'm trying to make is we need also, when we set expectations. Oh, sorry, my video's on. We need that also when we set expectations, that we set people up for success. I don't expect my electrician to do my plumbing. Right? What are your strengths and how can we help do this? And then all that understanding, that communication we can start getting to a world where forgiveness is the part that we really need to focus on. And forgiveness is such a powerful thing. Like, we've all messed up at some point. We've transgressed against someone we care about. How would we feel if those we transgressed against and apologized to didn't receive the apology and still harbored feelings of angst and resentment toward us? It can really, really damage a relationship. If somebody apologizes, it's not our duty to them to forgive. It is our duty to ourselves. It is our duty to ourselves. There is no future without forgiveness. I recall, this is going to be late 90s, the Tabor high school shooting here in Alberta, where the son of the local priest was murdered. And the first thing the priest did when he came out and was being interviewed, and we've all sort of been sensitized to the fact that when something like this happens, there's cries for revenge and anger. And he came out, and first thing he said is, "I forgive the shooter." From that moment, that really affected me. And the healing that it did, that, forgiving somebody is the most selfish thing that you can do, because you're removing that. My dad used to tell me this one thing is when we don't forgive, it's like carrying a sack of potatoes on your belt loop. It's heavy, and then after a while it just becomes rotted and smells, but you keep carrying it around. Being able to forgive means you're able to just take that sack of potatoes and throw it away, and you're able to move forward. So let's consider a hypothetical situation, okay? Party A has offered an apology to Party B, and Party B accepts the apology and moves forward towards reconciling the relationship. That means the offended person makes an effort to accept the apology by way of, thanks, I acknowledge and I accept, and I want to work with you on creating a plan that this doesn't happen to either one of us again. It's difficult sometimes to let go of those preconceived notions of the intention of the offending party. You want sometimes to punish them. You want retribution. However, you also need to keep in mind the relationship and accept the apology with kindness. This ensures forward movement of the relationship and an acknowledgement to the other that you also value the effort and the gesture of making an apology, or even if it's a bad one, like we did at the outset, it was decent but not quite there. Heck, thanks for the effort, right? Sometimes the difficulty in accepting the apology is when you don't feel heard enough yet, right? They don't understand. Just because they took a guess of what their involvement was, or what your hurt is, it doesn't mean they got it right. And so you're allowed to talk about those things. I'm not saying always accept anybody who's apologizing to you, but when we remove that emotion, we're able to work with somebody instead of against somebody. We can avoid kind of being in that sort of anger mountain. Now, the anger mountain is typically what we do. We get offended, we blow up, we feel really, really bad, and then we go back to that status quo. And we have to avoid that. We have to avoid that, because the anger mountain, there's a way of just skipping throughout all that. And did you know that this is scientifically proven? If somebody offends you, you can go to the mirror by yourself and you feel angry, and you just tell yourself, I have reason to be angry. I'm justified in my anger. You immediately feel less angry. You can control that aspect of yourself, because the truth is, we're all allowed to be angry. We're just not allowed to act in an angry manner. That's where taking that time to kind of recoup and refocus is really, really important. Now, I'm also conscious of time, so I do kind of want to move forward into the apologies that we talked about. So let's try and rework this apology together, okay? I am truly sorry for poking fun of you, although it wasn't my intention to hurt your feelings. I recognize that my words were hurtful. What can I do to make this better? We all kind of agreed. I think that it was over 90% agreed that this was a pretty good apology. I want you to notice something. There are no, at no point in this apology is there, I apologize or I'm sorry. A good apology doesn't need that. It doesn't need that. So we like this apology. What can we do to even add to this? I don't know. I think I kind of like that one better than the example that we gave. I think this is a pretty good apology. So let's move on to this one. Am I a little bit? Yeah, this one here. I know I shouldn't have done that. I know I probably should have asked you first. I know I can sometimes be a bull in a china shop. Let's focus on this one. What is a better way to apologize for this one? Now, what we've kind of brought up is this example. Taking over the meeting was not okay. I should not have done that. Before the meeting, I should have asked you if you could present the projections instead of interrupting. That would have shown the respect that my actions were lacking. Man, does that, like, it feels different even in just saying it. I know I should have done that. I know I probably should have asked you first. I know I can sometimes be a bull in a china shop. The missing aspect here is the understanding of the impact on you and the plan and the understanding of what I need to do to avoid doing that in the future. And that's really, really important. Now, because we're running short, because this training does go till 1 o'clock, I'm going to ask right now for an evaluation. This is just a QR code. If you lift up your phones right to that QR code, you go right to the evaluation piece, and we'd love to get the feedback from you. We would love to get the feedback from you about not only what we did good in this presentation, but what we can do better. And we incorporate and we take your feedback every year very, very seriously, and we do our very best to incorporate that in the following year's presentation. Again, I also want to remind you that if you wish to be a part of the Conflict Resolution Day Committee, we 100% will accept you. The standard that we have is your intent. That's it. If you want to come in, you want to help, you want to contribute to better dialogue and managing and conflict resolution in our communities, you're in. So keep that in mind. This is a QR code that takes us right to the website. So if you want to check it out, I like that little dinosaur that's in there. That's very, very cute. Whoever did that, the QR code generator right here really got it right. But on behalf of the Conflict Resolution Day Committee, on behalf of Chris and Cindy and Yas, we understand that you couldn't be here. Yasafina, our co-chair, wishing you well. We're thinking of you. Paulette, thank you. And again, everybody who has sponsored, everybody who has helped, and everybody who has been part of the committee, thank you very much for your contribution. And of course, to all of you who took the time to be here today, thank you. So I am going to